The crystal chamber on Valoria Prime sparkled under the light of twin suns. 12 species sat in their designated seats arranged in a perfect circle. At the center stood a platform where decisions were made. Decisions that shaped the galaxy. Ambassador Minho stood in the human section, his hands clasped behind his back. His gray suit was perfectly pressed. His face showed nothing. He had known this day would come for months now. The whispers in the corridors. The closed meetings he was not invited to. The way other ambassadors stopped talking when he entered a room. High Chancellor Vexthar rose from his seat. The Kreathi leader was tall, his silicon-based body gleaming like polished stone. His voice carried across the chamber with the weight of authority built over centuries. "We gather today to address a matter long overdue," Vexthar began. "The human question. For 200 years we have tolerated their presence among us. We have shared our technology. We have opened our worlds. We have tried to guide them toward civilization." Minho listened. He had heard these arguments before. Humanity was too violent, too primitive, too unpredictable. They did not fit the careful order that the Council had maintained for thousands of years. They fight among themselves. Vexthar continued. They lack proper respect for authority. They question everything. They change everything they touch. Their culture is chaos. Their methods are crude. They are not ready to stand beside us as equals. Minho noticed Councillor Thyron shifting in her seat. The Eldari diplomat was young by Council standards, barely 300 years old. Her telepathic abilities made her uncomfortable with lies. She knew what this truly was. Not concern for human development, fear of what humans might become. "Therefore," Vexthar announced, "I call for a vote. Humanity shall be formally exiled from the Galactic Council, all trade agreements suspended, all technology licenses revoked, all diplomatic relations severed. They will have one standard month to remove their people from Council space." The vote began. One by one, the species declared their position. The Vryn hivemind voted yes without discussion. The Thexian trader clans voted yes, though their representative looked uncomfortable. The Kartesh Military Confederation voted yes with enthusiasm. 11 votes for exile, 0 against, 1 abstention from the Eldari. Silence filled the chamber. All eyes turned to Minho. They expected rage. Perhaps threats. Maybe even violence. That was what they believed about humans. That they were creatures of passion and anger. Minho walked slowly to the center platform. His footsteps echoed in the quiet. When he reached the speaking position, he looked around the circle. He met each ambassador's eyes. Some looked away. Others stared back with satisfaction. "Thank you," Minho said simply. His voice was calm. "Thank you for 2 centuries of cooperation. We learned much from you. We hope that we contributed something in return. We wish you well in your future endeavors. Humanity will comply with the terms of exile immediately." That was all. No speech about injustice. No warnings about consequences. No appeals to mercy. Just a simple acknowledgement and acceptance. Vexthar seemed disappointed. He had prepared counter-arguments for human protests, but there were none. Thyron watched Minho with something like admiration in her eyes. Minho turned and walked out of the chamber. His assistant, a young woman named Jisoo, waited outside. She commanded the security detail in the human embassy's transport ship. "Sir?" she asked quietly. "Send the recall order," Minho said. "All human personnel. Every station. Every world. Every outpost. We have 30 days, Jisoo nodded. She had anticipated this. Plans were already in place. Within hours, the message went out across the galaxy. Humans began packing. On Nexus Station 7, Chief Engineer Hyojin received the order while elbow-deep in the environmental control system. She was making her daily adjustments. The small changes that kept the aging station running smoothly. She looked at the message for a long time. Then she carefully wrote down everything she knew about the system. Every quirk, every workaround, every secret the official manuals did not contain. She left the notes in her quarters. On the agricultural world of plenty, human farmers began teaching their alien assistants the irrigation schedules they had developed. Schedules adapted to the local soil, the local rain patterns, the local pests. The assistants wrote everything down, but they did not understand why these specific timings mattered. The humans tried to explain. There was not enough time. In the medical stations, human doctors transferred their patient files. They tried to explain the treatment protocols they had developed for cross-species diseases. The diseases that affected multiple species in different ways. It took years of experience to recognize the patterns. The replacement staff took notes. They looked confident. Across the galaxy, human teachers said goodbye to alien students. Human mechanics left their repair shops. Human mediators closed their case files. Human artists packed their tools. Human merchants settled their accounts. They left everything that belonged to others. No theft, no sabotage, no last acts of revenge. Jisoo had been clear about that. They would leave with dignity. On Nexus Station 7, Station Master Kale watched the human staff depart. He was Vryn, part of a hive mind that excelled at computation. He felt confident. Humans had maintained the station, yes, but the manuals were clear. The procedures were documented. How difficult could it be? 3 days after Hyejin left, a small alarm went off. The humidity in the southern sector was too high. Kale checked the manual. It said to run the environmental cycle for 6 hours. He did exactly that. The humidity stayed high. He ran it for 6 more hours. The humidity got worse. He checked the manual again. The manual said 6 hours. Kale did not find Hyejin's notes. Not yet. On the 30th day, the last human transport left Council space. Minyo stood on the bridge watching the stars. Commander Jisoo approached him. "Do you want to look back?" she asked. Minho shook his head. "No, let us look forward. We have work to do. We have a new home to build." Behind them, the vast network of galactic civilization continued its daily routine. Millions of beings going about their business. The council members congratulated themselves on removing a problematic element. Trade continued. Ships flew their routes. Stations hummed with activity. Everything seemed normal. But in 1,000 places across the galaxy, small things began to go wrong. A maintenance cycle missed here. An irrigation schedule incorrect there. A diplomatic channel closed. A trade negotiation failed. A medical treatment protocol misapplied. Small things. Nothing that could not be fixed. Nothing that seemed important, not yet. 6 months after the humans left, Station Master Kale sat in his office surrounded by error reports. The stack of digital files grew larger every day. His multiple brain nodes processed the information rapidly, but the solutions would not come. Nexus Station 7 was falling apart. The environmental systems flickered between too hot and too cold. The water recycling produced a strange taste that worried residents. The gravity generators made odd humming sounds. The air filters needed constant replacement. Each problem was small. Together they created chaos. Kale had followed every manual exactly. His team had implemented every protocol perfectly. Yet everything broke anyway. In frustration, he went to search Hyejin's old quarters one more time. The room was empty except for basic furniture. Then he noticed a small notebook wedged between the bed and the wall. His manipulator arms pulled it free. The notebook was filled with handwritten notes. Detailed observations about the station's systems. The environmental controls for the southern sector. Manual says 6 hours, but this sector needs 5.5 or humidity spikes. The water recycling. Filter replacement schedule in the manual is wrong. Check taste daily. Replace when metallic flavor appears, usually 3 days early. The gravity generators. Humming sound is normal below 30 Hz. Above 30 Hz means bearing wear. Add lubricant. Page after page of corrections. Adjustments. Workarounds. All the things the official documentation did not include. All the knowledge that came from years of daily experience with an aging station. Kale felt something his hive mind rarely experienced. Horror. This was just one human. One station. One set of systems. How many other humans had possessed similar knowledge? How much had the council lost? On the agricultural world of plenty, Director Sorn faced a different crisis. The crops were dying, not all at once, not dramatically, just slowly failing to thrive. Yields were down 40% across 3 colony worlds. Sorn could not understand why. His people followed the agricultural protocols exactly. They planted according to the schedule. They watered by the guidelines. They applied fertilizer as directed, yet the human farmers had consistently achieved 70% higher yields on the same land. Sorn reviewed the records carefully. He found notes from the human farmers. They had not followed the standard protocols at all. They had modified everything. different irrigation times for different fields based on soil drainage, different fertilizer mixes based on local mineral content, different planting depths based on seasonal temperature variations. The humans had treated each field as unique. They had observed. They had adapted. They had learned the land. Soren tried to implement their methods. But there were hundreds of fields, thousands of variables. The humans had known these things instinctively after years of work. His people tried to learn in weeks. It was not enough. Food shipments began to slow. Prices started to rise. At the medical station orbiting Kresh Prime, Dr. Velnoth faced an outbreak. A disease had spread from a cargo ship to the station, then to the planet below. It affected 3 different species in 3 different ways. The Kryathi developed breathing problems. The Thexians showed skin discoloration. The Kartesh became lethargic and confused. Standard treatments helped one species but made the others worse. Dr. Velnoth searched the medical database desperately. He found a file created by a human epidemiologist named Tayan. She had documented this exact disease 5 years ago. Her notes were detailed. The disease was a mutation that affected neural chemistry differently in each species. Treatment required species-specific approaches applied simultaneously. Tayan's protocols worked. The outbreak was contained. But it took 3 weeks instead of 3 days. 17 beings died who might have lived if the human expert had been present. Dr. Velnoth wondered how many other diseases existed in the database with human-created solutions. How many subtle patterns only human doctors had learned to recognize. The logistics networks across the galaxy began to fail in strange ways. Ships arrived at wrong ports. Cargo sat in warehouses because paperwork did not match. Trade deals collapsed over misunderstandings. Trade Minister Calvon of the Thexian clans investigated. What he discovered troubled him deeply. Human logistics coordinators had maintained an invisible network of relationships. They knew which captains could be trusted with delicate cargo. They knew which port officials needed extra documentation and which ones preferred verbal agreements. They knew when to push regulations and when to work around them. They knew how to translate between species with completely different business cultures. A Kryathi merchant wanted everything in writing with multiple signatures. A Thexian preferred a simple handshake and mutual understanding. A Vryn needed data streams and computational verification. When they tried to trade directly, they frustrated each other. The humans had bridged these gaps. They spoke everyone's language. They translated not just words but intentions and expectations. Without them, the official systems tried to handle everything. The official systems were not designed for cultural flexibility. They were rigid. They followed rules. Rules that different species interpreted differently. Trade volume dropped by 15% in 6 months. Calvon compiled a report. He presented it to the council. High Chancellor Vexthar read it and dismissed the concerns. Temporary adjustment problems, Vexthar announced. We are adapting to manage our own affairs without primitive assistance. These issues will resolve themselves. Councillor Thyron sat in the meeting and said nothing. But she began keeping her own records. She documented every failure, every problem, every crisis that grew worse instead of better. The council allocated more resources, more money, more equipment, more personnel. But they could not allocate experience. They could not allocate the instinct that came from years of daily work. They could not allocate the ability to see patterns and adapt. In the human territories, life continued very differently. The Exile fleet had discovered a cluster of resource-rich star systems far from Council space. President Do-hyun coordinated the settlement efforts. The engineers who had maintained Council stations now built new ones from scratch. The farmers who had fed Council worlds now established agriculture on fresh planets. The doctors who had treated alien diseases now focused on human health. The teachers who had educated alien children now trained the next generation of humans. All those skills the Council had dismissed as menial labor. All that knowledge they had taken for granted. It turned out to be exactly what was needed to build a civilization from nothing. Human colonies spread quickly. Ships brought news of good land, rich minerals, clean water, hope. Back on Nexus Station 7, Station Master Kale used Heejin's notebook to fix the environmental systems. It worked. The station stabilized. But Kale could not stop thinking about one simple fact. This was one notebook, one station, one human's knowledge. How many notebooks had left with the humans? How many had never been written down at all? How much knowledge existed only in human minds, gained through practice and observation and simple daily care? The Council had exiled millions of humans. Each one had taken their expertise with them, and the galaxy was beginning to understand what that meant. 18 months after the exile, Trade Minister Calvan stood before the Galactic Council, with numbers that no one wanted to see. Economic output is down 27%, he said. His voice was steady, but his hands shook slightly. Food production down 40%. Medical response times tripled. Infrastructure failures occurring at 10 times the previous rate. Trade disputes up 60%, and these numbers are getting worse, not better. High Chancellor Vexthar sat rigid in his seat. These are temporary problems. We simply need more time to adjust. Councillor Thyron stood up. She had remained quiet for months, gathering evidence. Now she spoke. How much more time? She asked. 2 years? 5, 10? Chancellor, these are not adjustment problems. These are structural failures. We removed a critical component from galactic civilization. We are watching the consequences. She activated a holographic display. Data filled the chamber. Charts, graphs, statistics, all showing the same pattern of decline. Humans occupied 4% of council positions. Thyron continued, but they were involved in 67% of all cross-species coordination tasks. They were the ones who made different species work together. They translated between cultures. They bridged gaps we did not even know existed. Without them, we are discovering that we cannot actually cooperate effectively. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Some counselors looked uncomfortable. Others angry. We are superior to humans in every measurable way, a Kartesh delegate protested. Our technology is more advanced. Our lifespan's longer. Our knowledge deeper. How can we be dependent on them? Superior at what? Thyron challenged. Mathematics? Yes, engineering. Yes, but what about understanding emotions? What about adapting to chaos? What about working with beings completely different from yourself? Humans excelled at these things. We dismissed these abilities as unimportant. We are learning how wrong we were. The chamber erupted in argument. Vexthar tried to restore order, but the cracks in his authority were showing. The real crisis came 2 weeks later. The Kartesh and the Thexian clans had disputed a border region for centuries. Both species claimed the same resource-rich systems. For 40 years, human mediators had managed this conflict. They maintained communication channels. They diffused tensions before they escalated. They found compromises that both sides could accept. Without the mediators, old grievances resurfaced. A Kartesh patrol seized a Thexian mining ship. The Thexians retaliated by blockading a Kartesh trade route. Military vessels moved to defensive positions. Threats were exchanged. The council tried to intervene. But the Kartesh and Thexians could barely communicate. Their cultures were too different. The Kartesh valued direct action and strength. The Thexians valued subtle negotiation and long-term relationships. Each saw the other as dishonest and aggressive. The humans had understood both perspectives. They had translated not just words but intentions. They had helped each side see the other's honor in their own terms. Now there was no one to do that. The situation escalated toward war. Theron worked desperately to find a solution. She contacted old human mediators, but they were gone, deep in human territory, building their new civilization. She sent messages anyway, begging for help. The responses were polite but firm. Humanity had been exiled. The council had made its choice. 3 days before the crisis would have become open warfare, the Thexian clan leader received a private message. It was from a human merchant named Bora who had traded with the Thexians for 20 years. The message was simple. The Kartesh see retreat as weakness, but they respect strength that shows mercy. If you withdraw your blockade while keeping your fleet visible, they will see it as confident strength, not surrender. They will match your withdrawal to save face. Both sides can claim victory. Both sides can keep honor. The Thexian leader took the advice. It worked. The crisis was diffused. But it was a close thing. And it was only one crisis. In other parts of the galaxy, other problems grew worse. The cultural scene withered. Galactic entertainment had become boring and predictable. The art galleries showed only technically perfect but emotionally empty works. The music was mathematically complex but soulless. The stories were logically constructed but failed to move anyone. Human artists had brought something the other species lacked. Raw emotion, passion, the willingness to be vulnerable in their art. Other species had admired this quality even while dismissing humans as primitive. Now that quality was gone and its absence left a hole no one could fill. Young beings across the galaxy felt it. They started to question, to protest, why had humans been exiled? What had they really done wrong? Some began to demand answers. High Chancellor Vexthar faced growing opposition. His supporters dwindled. Even species that had voted enthusiastically for the exile now questioned the decision, not out of compassion for humans, out of self-interest. The exile was destroying their own quality of life. A political coup was brewing. Thyron was at its center. Meanwhile, in human space, President Dohyun received intelligence reports about council problems. His advisors were divided. Some wanted to gloat, others wanted to offer help immediately. A few suggested using the crisis to gain political leverage. Dohyun listened to all of them. Then he made his decision. "We do nothing," he said. "Not yet. They chose to exile us. They need to choose to ask for our return. We will not beg to help people who threw us away. But when they ask with genuine respect, we will answer. On our terms. As equals." The human colonies continued to grow. New worlds were settled. New cities rose. The humans built everything themselves. They did not have advanced alien technology. They had something else. The knowledge of how to make things work, how to adapt, how to persist. Ships from minor alien species began to appear in human space. Species the Council had also marginalized. The small civilizations, the ones without impressive technology or military power. They came seeking trade, seeking alliances, seeking what humans offered, practical cooperation without arrogance. The Frontier Coalition began to form. Humans and minor species working together, building something new, something that valued contribution over prestige. Back in Council space, the breaking point arrived. A massive infrastructure failure cascaded across 3 major trade hubs simultaneously. Power systems failed. Life support became unstable. Thousands of beings had to be evacuated. The investigation revealed that all 3 hubs had been maintained by human engineering teams. The replacement teams had followed the manuals. But the manuals were inadequate. The real knowledge had been in the humans' experience, their instinct for problems before they became critical, their ability to jury-rig solutions when official parts were unavailable. No one died, but it was close. That night, Vexthar was removed from power. The vote was unanimous. Even his own species voted against him. Thyron became the new council speaker. Her first act was to send a message to human space. An official communication, a formal apology, a request for humanity to return to the council. She did not know if they would answer. She did not know if they would forgive. She only knew that the council had been wrong, catastrophically wrong, and now they had to face the consequences of their arrogance. The message was sent, and the council waited. 3 years after the exile, a council delegation arrived at New Terra. The human capital world gleamed below them like a jewel. Cities of glass and steel spread across green continents. Orbital stations hummed with industry. Ships moved in orderly patterns through the traffic lanes. Councillor Thyron led the delegation. She looked at the thriving world and felt something like shame. The council had expected humanity to struggle in exile, to barely survive. Instead, they had built this. The delegation's ship was kept waiting in orbit for 3 days before receiving landing clearance. It was a pointed message. The council had made humans wait many times, deliberate delays to show who held power. Now the situation was reversed. When they finally landed, they were taken to a conference center in the capital. The room was simple but elegant. Human design. Nothing like the grand crystal chambers of Valoria Prime, but somehow more welcoming. President Dohyun entered with his advisors. He was older now, his hair graying at the temples, but his posture was confident. He carried himself like someone who had built something worth protecting. Thyron stood. "President Dohyun, thank you for seeing us." Dohyun nodded. "Counselor, please sit." The formality hung in the air. Once, humans had been grateful for any council attention. Now the council needed to be polite. Thyron did not waste time. "We were wrong. The exile was unjust. We acted out of prejudice and fear. Our civilization is suffering because of our mistake. People are dying. Systems are failing. We came to apologize and to ask if humanity would consider returning to the council." She said it plainly. No political maneuvering. No attempts to minimize the error. Just the truth. Do-Yun studied her for a long moment. Your apology is appreciated. But I need to be clear. If humanity helps the Council, it will not be as it was before. We will not return as subordinates. We will not accept second-class status. We will not be dismissed or taken for granted again. We understand, Thyron said. What are your terms? A human woman stepped forward. Ambassador Soyeon. She had spent the last 3 years building the Frontier Coalition. Now she would negotiate with the council that had exiled her people. First, Soyeon said, formal recognition of the Frontier Coalition as an equal governmental body. Second, reparations to humans who lost property during the exile. Third, restructuring of the council to include proportional representation. Every species gets a voice based on population and contribution, not historical prestige. One of the alien delegates bristled. You dare make demands? You are the exiled party. You should be grateful we are willing to forgive your past transgressions. Do-Yun's expression did not change. Our transgressions? We were exiled for being different, for not conforming to your standards. The only transgression was yours. If you want our help, you will treat us with respect. If not, we are doing fine on our own. The delegate started to argue. Thyron held up her hand. We accept your terms, she said quietly. The other delegates gasped. Restructure the council? Give up the power structure that had existed for millennia? It was unthinkable. The old way failed, Thyron said firmly. We can accept that and build something better. Or we can cling to pride and watch everything collapse. I choose survival. I choose improvement. Anyone who disagrees can vote me out as speaker. But these are my terms to humanity. No one challenged her. They all knew she was right. The negotiations took 2 weeks. They were difficult. Centuries of assumptions had to be questioned. Power had to be shared. Compromises had to be made on all sides. But eventually, an agreement was reached. Humanity would provide humanitarian aid immediately. Technical teams would return to critical infrastructure. Medical personnel would help with ongoing health crises. Food shipments would resume. But humans would return as consultants, not servants. They would be paid well. They would be respected. They would have equal voice in decisions. And they would maintain their own independent government in the Frontier Coalition. Former Chancellor Vexthar watched the agreement from his home on the Cryathi homeworld. He was elderly now, his silicon body showing signs of age. He had been stripped of power and influence. His name was associated with the greatest political disaster in council history. He could have raged against the injustice. Could have blamed others. Could have insisted he was right all along. Instead, he recorded a private message to Thyron. I was wrong, he said simply. I let pride and fear guide me. I convinced myself that our way was the only way. That strength meant dominance. That difference was weakness. I was wrong about all of it. Do not let my mistakes be repeated. Build something better. Thyron received the message. She did not know if Vexthar expected forgiveness. She did not know if he deserved it. But she appreciated the honesty. It took courage to admit such total failure. The first human aid ships arrived in Council space 3 weeks after the agreement was signed. Chief Engineer Haijin was on one of them, returning to Nexus Station 7. Station Master Kale met her at the dock. He looked exhausted. 3 years of struggling with systems he did not fully understand had worn him down. Thank you for coming back, he said. Haijin smiled. I left my notebook. Figured you might need some help interpreting it. Kyle laughed. It was the first time he had laughed in months. Your notebook saved this station. But yes, there is much I still do not understand. Then let me teach you properly, Haijin said. Not just what to do, but why it works. So next time I leave, you will truly know the systems. That became the model. Humans did not just fix problems. They trained others. They shared knowledge. They built capacity. The goal was not to make the council dependent on humans again. The goal was to create real cooperation. It was slow work, difficult work, but it was the right work. On Plenty, human farmers worked beside alien agriculturalists. They explained not just the schedules, but the observations that created them. How to read the soil, how to watch the plants, how to adapt to changing conditions. In the medical stations, human doctors trained mixed species teams. They taught pattern recognition, diagnostic intuition, the soft skills that made the difference between adequate care and excellent care. In the logistics networks, human coordinators showed others how to build relationships, how to understand cultural differences, how to find creative solutions when official procedures failed. Slowly, galactic civilization began to stabilize, not returning to what it was, becoming something new, something that valued different kinds of strength. Ambassador Minho, now retired, watched from his home on New Terra. He had spent 30 years building relationships with the Council, had watched those relationships destroyed in a single vote. Now he saw them rebuilding. Different, but perhaps stronger. His old friend Thyron visited him one evening. They sat on his balcony watching the sunset. "Did you know it would come to this?" she asked. "When you left so quietly, did you know we would need you back?" Minho considered the question. "I knew you would realize eventually. How long it would take I could not predict. But humans learned long ago that you cannot force people to value you. You can only do your work well. Let your absence speak louder than your presence ever did, and hope that eventually understanding comes." "We nearly did not learn in time," Thyron said quietly. "But you did learn," Minho replied. "That is what matters." 5 years after the exile, the Galactic Compact was signed. Ambassador Minho stood on the stage in the Great Hall of New Terra, watching as representatives from dozens of species added their marks to the document. The Compact was nothing like the old Council Charter. It guaranteed proportional representation. It protected minority species from exploitation. It required cultural exchange programs. It established economic safeguards. It was built on the principle that every species had value, regardless of their technology or military power. It was messy. It was complicated. It would require constant work to maintain, but it was fair. Councillor Thyron, now Grand Chancellor of the Reformed Council, signed last. She looked at Minho. They had spent 3 years working together on this document, fighting for every clause, compromising where necessary, standing firm where principles were at stake. They had become friends, an unlikely friendship between species who had been enemies. But perhaps that was the point. The compact was built on the idea that old divisions could be overcome. Not everyone was happy. Some old council species felt they had given up too much power. Some humans felt their people were being too forgiving. Both sides had hardliners who wanted revenge or restoration of the old order. But most beings just wanted things to work. They wanted food on their tables. They wanted safe stations. They wanted functioning systems. The compact promised that. Slowly, support grew. The real test came 3 months after the signing. A massive solar flare erupted from the star in the Kelvin system. Warnings went out across the sector. The colony world of Kelvin 3 had 6 hours to evacuate 4 million beings. 3 species lived there, including 5,000 humans. The evacuation required perfect coordination. Human logistics coordinators mapped the routes. Frin computational networks optimized the schedules. Crathy heavy transports provided the ships. For 6 hours, 3 species worked together without a single mistake. Ships launched precisely on schedule. Routes were adjusted in real time as conditions changed. Resources were shared without hesitation. When the last ship cleared the atmosphere, everyone was accounted for. 4 million beings saved, 0 casualties. The news spread across the galaxy. This was what cooperation could achieve. This was what the compact had promised. On Nexus Station 7, Hijin celebrated with her mixed-species engineering team. She had spent 2 years training them, teaching them not just the technical skills but the way of thinking that made good engineers great. The ability to anticipate problems, to improvise solutions, to understand systems as living things that needed care. Her lead apprentice was a young Kriathi named Rektar. His father had served under Vexthar, had supported the exile. Rektar had grown up hearing humans dismissed as inferior. Working with Hyejin had changed his mind. She was brilliant, patient, generous with her knowledge. She treated him as an equal despite his inexperience. She answered his questions without making him feel stupid. One day he asked her why she had come back, why she was willing to help the people who had exiled her. Hyejin thought about it. "Because you are not your father," she said finally. "You did not vote to exile us. You were just a child. Why should you suffer for his mistakes? The work needs doing. I know how to do it." "That is enough reason to help, but are you not angry?" Rektar asked. "Do you not want revenge?" "I was angry," Hyejin admitted, "for a long time. But anger is exhausting, and it does not fix broken systems. Building something better is more satisfying than destroying something old. Similar conversations happened across the galaxy. Slowly, relationships formed, humans and aliens working side by side, learning from each other. Building trust, it was not always easy. Old prejudices lingered. Misunderstandings happened. Some humans could not forgive. Some aliens could not accept that humans were truly their equals. But every successful collaboration built confidence. Every crisis handled together proved the value of cooperation. Every friendship formed showed that the divisions were artificial. A young human named Ji-hoon entered the Galactic Institute of Technology. He was part of the first generation born after the exile. He had grown up in the Frontier Coalition, knowing humans as independent and respected. Attending the institute meant living in council space. Learning alongside aliens. It was a big decision. His parents worried. What if the old prejudices returned? What if humans were mistreated again? But Ji-hoon wanted to go. He wanted to learn. He wanted to build bridges his parents' generation had fought to create. The institute was everything he hoped for. His classmates came from a dozen species. They studied together, argued about theories, collaborated on projects. Species differences mattered less than shared curiosity. Yes, sometimes someone made an ignorant comment about humans, but others would correct them. The culture was changing. Slowly but genuinely, Ji-hoon specialized in xenoarchaeology. He studied fallen civilizations. What he found disturbed him. The pattern repeated throughout history. A dominant species would marginalize others, would dismiss certain skills as unimportant, would take the contributions of others for granted. Eventually, the marginalized would leave or rebel. The civilization would collapse. Some civilizations learned from their mistakes. They rebuilt with humility. They created more equitable systems. They survived, others clung to pride. They refused to change. They died. Ji-hoon presented his research at a conference. The audience included species from across the galaxy. They listened quietly as he described civilization after civilization, making the same mistake. We almost became another failed example, he concluded. We were lucky. We learned before it was too late. But the lesson is clear. No species is superior. No contribution is worthless. We all need each other. The applause was genuine, not just from humans, from everyone. On Valoria Prime, a memorial was erected. It listed the names of beings who had died during the collapse after the exile, casualties of arrogance and pride. The memorial was controversial. Some thought it blamed the council too harshly. Others thought it was necessary. Grand Chancellor Thyron gave the dedication speech. We built this monument not to shame ourselves, she said, but to remember, to learn. These beings died because we forgot that every life has value. Every contribution matters. We cannot undo the past. But we can honor these dead by building a better future. By never forgetting this lesson. Former Chancellor Vexthar attended the ceremony. He was ancient now, near the end of his long life. He looked at the memorial with hollow eyes. After the ceremony, he spoke briefly with Thyron. I hope history judges you more kindly than it will judge me, he said quietly. Thyron did not know how to respond. Vexthar had caused immense suffering, but he had also learned. He had admitted his errors. That took courage. History will judge us all by what we built together, she said finally. Your mistakes are part of the story. But so is the fact that we learned from them. Ambassador Minho stood with them, old and gray now. He had given his life to building bridges between species, had watched those bridges burn, had helped rebuild them stronger. Come, he said to both of them. There is still work to do, always more work to do. They walked together through the streets of Valoria Prime, an old human, an elderly chancellor, a disgraced Kryathi leader, three beings who represented the pain and hope of a galaxy learning to be better. Above them, ships moved through the sky. Human ships, alien ships, moving together in patterns that would have been impossible 10 years before. The galaxy was healing, slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely, and in the end, that was all anyone could ask for.